The neutron star's magnetic field churned like an angry god, its radiation powerful enough to strip molecular bonds from existence. Most spacefaring species would have given the celestial monster a wide berth, but the U.S. Defiance wasn't most ships. Inside the bridge, Commander Elena Rodriguez sat with a posture that defied the chaotic environment around them. Her left hand, cybernetically enhanced from a previous mission gone wrong, traced invisible calculations on her tactical display. The prosthetic wasn't just a replacement. It was an extension of her computational ability, neural pathways intertwining with quantum processors in a dance of human-machine symbiosis. Quantum shielding at 73.6%, announced Lieutenant Aisha Khoury from her sensor station. Her voice carried a hint of excitement that bordered on scientific ecstasy. Magnetic flux is dancing right where we predicted, Commander. Rodriguez allowed herself the slightest curl of a smile. This wasn't just a mission. It was a proof of concept that would challenge everything the galactic scientific community believed about human technological limits. The ship itself was a marvel of unconventional design, where most species created vessels that followed strict geometric principles. The Defiance looked almost organic. Its hull incorporated metamaterials that could shift molecular structure in response to environmental stress. Carbon nanotubes intertwined with adaptive ceramic composites, creating a skin that was simultaneously armor and sensory network. Chief Science Officer Dr. Marcus Chen leaned forward, his augmented eyes, a combination of biological tissue and quantum-linked optical sensors, scanning multiple dimensional projections simultaneously. "The Zorn won't know what hit them," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Their target wasn't destruction. It was something far more complex. The Defiance had been tracking the specific quantum frequency, a mysterious signal that had appeared and disappeared across multiple star systems. Traditional xenographic analysis suggested it was random noise, but Dr. Chen's team had discovered a pattern, one that hinted at something profound lurking beneath the galactic background radiation. "Incoming quantum disturbance," Khoury announced. Her fingers danced across holographic interfaces, each movement precise and calculated. "Zorn battle cruiser entering sensor range. They're using standard penetration protocols." Rodriguez's cybernetic hand twitched almost imperceptibly. Standard. That word meant predictability. And predictability was the first step to vulnerability. The ship's internal systems hummed with a low, almost sentient resonance. This wasn't just a vessel. It was an experimental platform that pushed the boundaries of what humanity understood about physics, biology, and technological integration. Dr. Chen pulled up a holographic representation of their current position. The neutron star's magnetic lines wrapped around them like luminescent serpents, creating a cocoon of potentially lethal radiation. To any external observer, the Defiance looked like it was committing technological suicide. "Zorn battle cruiser is locking primary targeting systems," Khoury reported. Her tone remained clinical, but there was an underlying current of anticipation. "They're charging standard subspace disruptors." Rodriguez didn't move, didn't speak. She watched. The ship's experimental quantum-linked AI, an entity they'd nicknamed Araya, Advanced Responsive Intelligence Algorithm, began running thousands of predictive scenarios per microsecond. Its consciousness was distributed throughout the ship's systems, a living network that was more than just a computer. It was a collaborative intelligence. Outside, the neutron star's magnetic field continued its violent dance. Radiation that could obliterate conventional matter swirled around the Defiance like a protective, paradoxical embrace. The ship wasn't just surviving in this environment. It was harmonizing with it. "They're coming," Dr. Chen said softly, a statement of scientific observation rather than fear. The Zorn believed they were about to witness the destruction of another naive, technologically inferior species. They had no idea they were about to become participants in humanity's most audacious scientific experiment. The silent trap was about to spring. The Zorn communication array hummed with anticipation. Aboard the massive battle cruiser Null Horizon, Sub-strategist Vexnar prepared what he believed would be a definitive psychological dismantling of the human vessel. His tentacular appendages manipulated holographic interfaces with practiced precision, drawing from a database of species subjugation protocols compiled over millennia of galactic conquests. What Vexnar didn't know was that every transmission was already being dissected, not just received, but actively analyzed by systems far more complex than he could imagine. In the Defiance's psychological warfare lab, a sterile, almost surgical space that defied traditional military design, Dr. Elena Rosario leaned back in her adaptive neural interface chair. Unlike traditional military psychologists, Rosario was a hybrid, part cinecultural anthropologist, part quantum neurologist, and entirely unconventional. AI, she spoke softly. Begin tertiary pattern recognition. The ship's AI responded through multiple channels, holographic displays, neural interface, and a subtle vibration that seemed to permeate the ship's very structure. Initiating cross-dimensional semantic analysis, the AI's voice was neither male nor female, neither mechanical nor fully organic. What the Zorn saw as a simple intimidation broadcast was already becoming something else entirely. Lieutenant Marcus Kim, the ship's communication specialist, had spent the last 7 years studying Zorn linguistic patterns. His workspace was a controlled chaos of linguistic algorithms, quantum translation matrices, and cultural deconstruction tools. Where most saw a communication challenge, Kim saw a complex puzzle waiting to be solved. The broadcast is following a classic hierarchical intimidation pattern, Kim muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. But there's something off about the underlying linguistic structure. On the main bridge, Commander Rodriguez watched the incoming transmission with a calm that bordered on the unsettling. Her cybernetic hand, a marvel of human biotechnology that was part medical prosthetic, part computational matrix, traced invisible patterns on her command interface. The Zorn transmission began to unfold. Holographic displays erupted with images of planetary destructions, species extinctions, technological subjugations, entire civilizations reduced to smoking ruins, vast space battles where resistance looked futile. It was a carefully constructed narrative of absolute dominance. But something was happening that the Zorn hadn't anticipated. Dr. Rosario's team was doing more than just watching. They were actively engaging with the transmission, using it as a sophisticated two-way communication channel. Each image, each horrific scene was being analyzed not just for its psychological impact, but as a complex informational network. We're not just receiving, Dr. Rosario explained to her team. We're conversing in a language they don't even realize exists. AI began to overlay the transmission with micro-encoded data packets. To the Zorn, it would appear to be nothing more than signal noise. But each packet was a sophisticated probe, gathering information about the Zorn's communication infrastructure, their psychological warfare algorithms, their very method of cognitive processing. Lieutenant Kim's linguistic algorithms started to decode something extraordinary. The Zorn's intimidation protocol wasn't just a communication strategy. It was a deeply ingrained cultural mechanism. Generations of technological superiority had transformed psychological warfare into a form of cultural art for them. And humans were about to completely rewrite their understanding of that art. Commander Rodriguez turned to Dr. Rosario. How deep can we go? A slight smile crossed Rosario's face, deeper than they can imagine. The laugh that emerged from the Defiance's crew wasn't a nervous reaction. It was a calculated response, a linguistic and psychological counterattack that would send ripples through the Zorn's understanding of conflict. What the Zorn saw as a moment of human weakness was actually the opening move in a game they were only beginning to understand. The psychological battlefield was being redefined, one quantum-encoded transmission at a time. Dr. Samira Nawaz's fingers trembled slightly as she reviewed the initial scan data. The energy pulse that had struck Lieutenant Aisha Khoury wasn't just a weapon. It was a key, unlocking something far more profound than anyone had anticipated. In the medical bay, which looked more like an advanced research laboratory than a traditional sick bay, Holographic displays danced with intricate genetic sequences. Corey lay on a biomechanical bed, her body a living canvas of biological transformation that defied every known principle of evolutionary adaptation. "This isn't just genetic modification," Dr. Noahs whispered to herself. "This is active genetic architecture." The Zorn's containment field had triggered something buried deep within the human genome. A complex network of dormant genetic switches developed during humanity's most desperate periods of survival. Lunar colonies, deep-sea research stations, extreme radiation environments. Each challenging habitat had left microscopic imprints in human DNA, waiting for the right catalyst. Lieutenant Corey's body was rewriting itself in real time. Muscular tissue began to reconfigure, not through simple hypertrophy, but through a quantum-level restructuring. Mitochondrial networks expanded, creating more efficient energy pathways. Neurological connections multiplied, forming complex three-dimensional lattices that would make a quantum computer look like an abacus. Chief Science Officer Dr. Marcus Chen watched the transformation with a mixture of scientific excitement and profound respect. "We've always known human DNA was more complex than we understood," he muttered. "But this is something else entirely." Araya, the ship's AI, began running complex simulations. Each microsecond revealed new layers of biological potential. The genetic adaptation wasn't just a response. It was an intelligent, proactive system of survival and improvement. In the observation room, Commander Rodriguez studied the data with a critical eye. Her own cybernetic enhancements, a testament to human ability to merge biological potential with technological innovation, allowed her to process the information at speeds that would overwhelm most biological intelligences. "It's a conversation," she said softly, more to herself than to anyone else. "The human body is having a conversation with the environment." Dr. Noahs zoomed in on Lieutenant Corey's cellular structure. What she saw defied conventional understanding. Radiation-damaged cells weren't just repairing themselves. They were actively learning from the damage, creating new molecular structures that could potentially absorb and redirect harmful energy. The Zorn's containment field, intended to isolate and neutralize, had become a catalyst for human potential. Lieutenant Corey's eyes snapped open, but they weren't entirely human anymore. Bioluminescent patterns danced across her irises, neural networks visible as subtle, shifting geometries. When she spoke, her voice carried multiple harmonic frequencies, a sound that was simultaneously human and something more. "I can feel everything," she said, her words resonating through the medical bay's sophisticated acoustic systems. "Not just my body. The ship, the space around us. It's all connected." Dr. Chen's quantum sensors began to go wild. Lieutenant Corey wasn't just experiencing a biological transformation. She was becoming a living interface between biological and quantum systems. The Zorn had no concept of what they had just triggered. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to transform. Not just technologically, but fundamentally. Where other species saw limitations, humans saw potential. Where others sought to control, humans sought to understand and integrate. Commander Rodriguez approached the medical bay's observation window. "Status report," she said calmly. Dr. Noahs took a deep breath. "We're looking at the next stage of human evolution." And the Zorn just provided the key. Outside, the neutron star's magnetic fields continued to dance, seemingly aware that something extraordinary was unfolding within the Defiance. The universe watched, waiting to see what would emerge from this crucible of adaptation. Lieutenant Corey smiled, an expression that was both deeply human and something entirely new. The subspace disruptor struck the Defiance with the force of 1,000 dying stars. But this was no ordinary impact. Chief Engineer Elena Rodriguez, no relation to the ship's commander, lived for moments like these. Her workspace was a symphony of controlled chaos. Holographic schematics danced around her, quantum entanglement monitors flickered with impossible data, and her custom-built interface looked more like an artist's workstation than an engineering console. "Incoming energy cascade," warned Araya, the ship's eye. Molecular disruption imminent. Alina's fingers moved with a musician's precision, not defending against the attack, but conducting it. The Zorn's weapon wasn't just a threat. It was raw potential waiting to be transformed. Most species would have attempted to shield or deflect. Humans, however, saw differently. The disruptor's energy began to flow through the Defiance's experimental quantum network, a system that was part communication infrastructure, part living computational matrix. Each molecular bond became a potential conduit, every energy wave a thread to be rewoven. "We're not blocking," Alina muttered, her augmented eyes tracking microscopic energy patterns. "We're translating." The ship's hull began to shimmer, not with traditional defensive mechanisms, but with an adaptive resonance that seemed to breathe and pulse. Nanoscale processors embedded in the metamaterial composition began to break down the disruptor's energy, analyzing its fundamental frequency, its molecular signature. Dr. Marcus Chen watched from the science station, his augmented eyes tracking quantum-level interactions that would be invisible to most species. "It's not absorption," he said softly. "It's conversion." The Zorn's primary weapon was being systematically dismantled, its destructive potential transformed into something entirely new. Where they saw a tool of annihilation, humans saw an opportunity for creation. Lieutenant Aisha Khoury, still recovering from her genetic transformation, moved to the engineering station. Her touch on the interface was different now, no longer purely mechanical, but something that blended biological intuition with quantum computation. "Frequency modulation at 78.3%, she announced. Her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate with the ship's very structure. "We're generating a counterwave that's more than just defensive." Alina Rodriguez's smile was nothing short of predatory. The Zorn's weapon was becoming a blueprint, its destructive potential being rewritten into something constructive. Araya projected a holographic representation of the energy transformation. What looked like chaotic disruption to the Zorn was actually a sophisticated process of technological alchemy. Each destructive wave was being parsed, understood, and repurposed. "They think in linear systems," Commander Rodriguez observed from her command chair. "We think in adaptive networks." The ship's experimental quantum network began to generate something unprecedented. The disruptor's energy wasn't just being neutralized, it was being used to create a new form of computational matrix. Each molecular disruption became a potential information channel, each energy wave a thread in a complex technological tapestry. Dr. Chen's monitors began to light up with impossible data. "We're generating a quantum communication network," he said, his voice a mixture of scientific excitement and pure wonder. "Using the weapon's own frequency as a transmission medium." The Zorn communication officers would later describe it as impossible. Their most advanced weapon was being transformed into a communication infrastructure more complex than anything in galactic history. Alina Rodriguez finished her complex manipulation, and the ship's systems seemed to exhale. The disruptor's energy had been completely transformed, converted from a weapon of destruction into a sophisticated computational resource. "Weapon analysis complete," Araya announced. "Adaptive replication protocols initialized." Lieutenant Khoury looked up, her eyes now carrying a subtle bioluminescent pattern that seemed to mirror the ship's quantum network. "We're not just surviving," she said. "We're evolving." Outside, the neutron star continued its violent dance, unaware that inside the Defiance, something extraordinary was unfolding. The Zorn had just provided humans with the most advanced technological gift imaginable, and had no idea they'd done so. Technological warfare had just been redefined. The personal histories of the Defiance's crew materialized around them, a holographic assault designed to shatter their collective spirit. But the Zorn had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of human resilience. Dr. Elena Rosario, the ship's lead psychological strategist, watched the incoming data stream with clinical fascination. Her workspace was a controlled chaos of neurological interfaces, cultural deconstruction algorithms, and adaptive empathy matrices. Where the Zorn saw vulnerability, she saw an opportunity. Each revealed memory was a strategic asset. Lieutenant Marcus Kim's background flickered into view. The Zorn had uncovered his complex family history, a lineage that spanned 3 generations of environmental refugees. His grandmother had survived the Great Pacific Collapse. His parents had rebuilt communities in underwater habitats. His own career was a testament to generational resilience. "Interesting approach," Kim murmured, his fingers dancing across linguistic translation interfaces. "They're trying to weaponize personal narratives." Commander Rodriguez understood immediately. This wasn't just a psychological attack. It was a sophisticated information warfare technique designed to fragment human collective identity. They would turn it into a weapon. Araya, the ship's AI, began to process the incoming data with something that almost resembled excitement. The broadcast wasn't just information. It was a complex communication network waiting to be decoded, manipulated, repurposed. Lieutenant Aisha Khoury, her recently transformed genetics allowing her to perceive information patterns humans had never before understood, began to see the Zorn's broadcast as a living, breathing entity. Each personal history was a thread in a larger narrative fabric. "They're showing us our weaknesses," she said softly, "but they don't understand what weakness means to us." The holographic displays began to shift. Where the Zorn had intended to show individual traumas, the human crew started weaving these personal histories into a collective narrative of survival, adaptation, and collective strength. Dr. Rosario's psychological warfare algorithms went into overdrive. The incoming data wasn't just being defended against, it was being actively transformed. A memory of Marcus Kim's grandmother surviving a catastrophic sea level rise became a testament to human adaptability. A traumatic moment in Commander Rodriguez's past, the loss of her first command during a deep space exploration mission, transformed into a narrative of leadership and resilience. "We're not just responding," Dr. Rosario explained to her team. "We're rewriting the entire communication paradigm." The Zorn had access to personal histories, but they lacked the fundamental understanding of how humans process collective trauma. Where other species might be broken by exposure of intimate vulnerabilities, humans saw an opportunity for connection, growth, and collective strength. Araya began encoding counter-narratives into the Zorn's own communication channels. Each personal history became a complex information packet, a strategic communication that would reshape their understanding of human psychological infrastructure. Lieutenant Kim's linguistic algorithms detected something extraordinary. The Zorn weren't just trying to break individual spirits. They were attempting to map human psychological vulnerabilities for future conquest. "They're creating a psychological taxonomy," he realized, "trying to understand how to break human collective resistance." Commander Rodriguez approached the main display, her cybernetic hand tracing complex communication patterns. "Then we'll give them a taxonomy they can't comprehend." The ship's communication systems began to pulse with a complex, adaptive resonance. Personal histories weren't just being defended, they were being transformed into a sophisticated communication network that would fundamentally challenge the Zorn's understanding of psychological warfare. Dr. Rosario looked up, a slight smile crossing her face. "We're not just surviving their attack," she said. "We're learning from it." Outside, the neutron star continued its violent dance, unaware that inside the Defiance, a far more complex battle was being waged. A war of narratives, of collective identity, of human potential. The Zorn had just provided humans with the most sophisticated psychological analysis imaginable, and they had no idea what was coming next. The moment the Zorn deployed their full arsenal, reality itself seemed to bend. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura stood at the quantum manipulation station, his fingers hovering over interfaces that looked more like abstract art than technological controls. Around him, the fabric of space-time began to ripple, not from external forces, but from deliberate, calculated human intervention. "Quantum entanglement protocol initiated," Araya announced, its voice carrying a resonance that was part computational precision, part something altogether more alive. The Zorn's weapon systems were works of millennia-long technological refinement. Centuries of galactic conquest had produced instruments of destruction so precise, so mathematically perfect that they were considered beyond improvement. Each weapon was a symphony of destructive potential, calibrated to neutralize any known form of resistance. They had never encountered human improvisation. Lieutenant Aisha Khoury, her recently transformed physiology, now a living quantum interface, began to see the incoming weapons not as threats, but as complex information networks. Her augmented perception transformed the battle space into a three-dimensional chess match where each weapon was a potential resource. "They're using fifth-dimensional targeting matrices," she observed, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with the quantum field itself. "But they're assuming linear causality." Commander Rodriguez watched the tactical display with a predator's focus. The Zorn believed they were launching a coordinated assault. In reality, they were providing the Defiance with the most sophisticated technological blueprint imaginable. Dr. Nakamura's quantum manipulation station began to sing. It wasn't a sound human ears were designed to hear. It was a vibrational language that existed at the intersection of mathematical possibility and pure potential. Each Zorn weapon became a portal. The ship's experimental quantum network, a system that was part communication infrastructure, part living computational matrix, began to resonate. Where other species would see incoming destruction, the Defiance's systems saw an opportunity for conversion, for transformation. "We're not defending," Dr. Nakamura muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "We're negotiating with probability." Araya projected holographic representations that defied traditional understanding. Incoming energy weapons were being parsed, understood, and fundamentally reinterpreted. Their destructive potential was being converted into computational resources, their targeting systems becoming sophisticated information channels. Chief Engineer Elena Rodriguez worked with a fury that was part scientific precision, part artistic creation. Her interface looked more like a musical instrument than a technological control system. Each incoming weapon became a note in a complex improvisational performance. "Quantum tunneling initiating," she announced. The words were almost a musical phrase. The Zorn communication officers would later describe what happened as impossible. Their most sophisticated weapons began to behave in ways that defied known physical laws. Targeting systems twisted. Energy weapons folded in on themselves. Destructive potential transformed into pure information. Lieutenant Marcus Kim's linguistic algorithms detected something extraordinary happening within the weapon systems. The Zorn weren't just losing control. Their entire technological paradigm was being rewritten in real time. "They communicate through their weapons," Kim observed. "For them, technology is a language, and we're becoming fluent." Commander Rodriguez approached the main tactical display. Her cybernetic interface pulsed with possibilities that existed beyond traditional three-dimensional thinking. "We're not just surviving," she said softly. "We're having a conversation." The neutron star outside seemed to pulse in sympathy, its magnetic fields dancing in complex patterns that mirrored the quantum manipulations happening within the Defiance. Dr. Nakamura looked up, a smile of pure scientific joy crossing his face. "Quantum negotiation complete," he announced. "We've just expanded the definition of technological interaction." The Zorn had provided humans with the most sophisticated technological gift imaginable, and they had no idea what was coming next. The Galactic Confederation's central monitoring station fell silent. Diplomat Varlik, a seasoned archival keeper from the Crystalline Collective, stared at the holographic display with a mixture of horror and fascination. What had begun as a routine observation of a minor species encounter was transforming into something that would rewrite fundamental understanding of interstellar dynamics. "Replay sequence," he commanded, his multi-crystalline vocal apparatus trembling slightly. The data stream from the conflict between the Zorn battlecruiser and the human vessel U.S. Defiance defied every established protocol of technological and biological interaction. It wasn't just a battle. It was a complete deconstruction of known scientific paradigms. Surrounding Varlik, representatives from 37 different species watched in stunned silence. The quantum observation chamber, A space designed to be the most technologically neutral environment in known space suddenly felt impossibly small. Dr. Lyra Solarin, the human diplomatic liaison to the Confederation, stood with a calm that bordered on the unsettling. Her presence was a study in controlled potential. Where other species saw a human, she knew they were witnessing something far more complex. "This isn't just a conflict," she explained, her voice carrying a resonance that seemed to cut through linguistic and technological barriers. "This is a demonstration of adaptive potential." The holographic displays showed multiple layers of interaction. Where traditional analysis would focus on weapon systems and tactical deployments, this conflict revealed something far more profound. The human vessel wasn't just defending itself, it was engaging in a multi-dimensional conversation that blurred the lines between technology, biology, and communication. Varlek's archival systems began to break down. The data didn't fit into any existing categorical framework. The U.S. Defiance was simultaneously a vessel, a living system, a computational matrix, and something that defied traditional classification. Their technological approach, muttered Zintok, a senior analyst from the Quantum Recursion Collective, "It's not linear. It's recursive, adaptive, living." The observation chamber's most advanced translation matrices struggled to process the communication patterns emerging from the conflict. What the Zorn saw as a weapon, humans transformed into a communication channel. What other species would interpret as destruction, the humans were using as a form of collective learning. Dr. Solarin stepped forward, her movement precise and calculated. "Humanity has always been defined by our ability to transform limitations into opportunities," she explained. "What you're seeing is not an anomaly. This is our fundamental nature." Varlek's archival systems began to generate warning cascades. The data they were witnessing challenged fundamental assumptions about technological development, species interaction, and the very nature of intelligence. The U.S. Defiance was rewriting the rules of engagement at a fundamental level. Quantum communication patterns emerged that suggested the human vessel was not just responding to the Zorn's attack, but was actively teaching, transforming, expanding the very conceptual framework of technological interaction. "They're not just surviving," Zintok observed. "They're evolving the conflict itself." The holographic displays began to show layers of interaction that went beyond traditional three-dimensional representations. Technological systems, biological responses, communication patterns, all were merging into a complex, adaptive network that seemed to breathe with its own intelligence. Dr. Solarin allowed herself the slightest smile. "We don't see barriers," she said softly. "We see potential." Varlek's crystalline structure began to vibrate with a complex resonance, part computational analysis, part something that approached pure wonder. The human vessel was demonstrating a form of intelligence that transcended traditional understanding. It wasn't just a species proving its strength. It was a fundamental redefinition of what strength could mean. The Galactic Confederation watched, collectively holding its breath, as humanity demonstrated that the most powerful technology is not about destruction, but about the capacity to transform, to learn, to expand. The universe would never be the same. The final confrontation wasn't a battle. It was a conversation. Commander Elena Rodriguez stood at the interface between human potential and galactic understanding. Around her, the Defiance had become something more than a vessel. It was a living testament to humanity's fundamental nature. Lieutenant Aisha Khoury, her transformed physiology, now a bridge between biological and quantum systems, approached the primary communication array. Her body vibrated with possibilities that defied traditional understanding of consciousness, biology, and technological integration. "We're not here to conquer," she transmitted, her communication a complex tapestry of linguistic, quantum, and empathetic signals. "We're here to understand." The Zorn leadership, those who had spent millennia believing in absolute technological superiority, found themselves confronted with a profound paradox. The humans weren't seeking destruction. They were offering collaboration. Dr. Marcus Chen's quantum communication algorithms began to generate something unprecedented. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a defense mechanism. It was an invitation. Araya, the ship's AI, began to synthesize a communication matrix that was part scientific proposal, part philosophical discourse, part pure potential. Each transmission carried multiple layers of meaning, technological blueprints that were simultaneously invitations to collaborative exploration. The communication wasn't linear. It wasn't hierarchical. It was recursive, adaptive, alive. Chief Engineer Elena Rodriguez worked at her interface, which looked more like an artist's canvas than a technological control system. Each signal was a brushstroke, each quantum fluctuation a colored yet undefined. "We're offering a different approach to existence," she explained to her crew. The words were both a strategy and a profound philosophical statement. The Zorn leadership found themselves confronted with a fundamental challenge to their entire conceptual framework. Humans weren't presenting themselves as conquerors or as the conquered. They were presenting themselves as collaborators in a universe of infinite potential. Dr. Elena Rosario, the ship's psychological strategist, had prepared a communication that was part scientific proposal, part cultural invitation. It wasn't about proving superiority. It was about demonstrating the power of collective growth. The transmission began to unfold. A blueprint for collaborative technological development that respected the unique evolutionary paths of different species. A quantum communication framework that allowed for multidimensional cultural exchange. A philosophical approach that saw diversity as the fundamental source of universal potential. Lieutenant Kim's linguistic algorithms detected something extraordinary. This wasn't just a communication. It was an entirely new approach to interspecies interaction. The Zorn found themselves confronted with a fundamental choice: recognize humanity as a collaborative partner, or be left behind in a universe that was rapidly redefining its understanding of intelligence and potential. Commander Rodriguez approached the primary communication interface. Her cybernetic systems, her biological potential, her collective experience, all merged into a singular moment of profound possibility. "We're not asking for permission," she transmitted. "We're offering collaboration." The universe seemed to hold its breath. Araya generated a final transmission, a complex matrix that was simultaneously a scientific proposal, a cultural invitation, and a demonstration of infinite potential. It wasn't just information. It was an entirely new way of understanding existence. The Zorn leadership would later describe the moment as a fundamental transformation. Humanity wasn't presenting itself as a species to be feared or conquered. They were presenting themselves as collaborators in the most profound sense. A new chapter in galactic understanding was about to begin, and it would be written not through conquest, but through collaboration.